down. He is on Jeskai aggro, playing against Nick Moore, who's on that Mardu control deck that we saw yesterday.
And this should be pretty interesting. Normally, if you think of the green-black mid-range decks like Abzan and Jund, they're a little bit more creature-orientated, and so the Jeskai decks usually win by just basically killing all their stuff. But Nick Moore has Lingering Souls as its main threat, which is a really hard creature to just answer with Snapcaster Mage Bolt. And Jim Davis isn't even on the full-on Jeskai control deck. He's on a Jeskai aggro deck, in which case Wall of Omens is going to be doing work.
As we see here, Wall of Omens is keeping back that Monastery Swift Spare. Nick was able to fire up his Shambling Vent and get into the red zone, knocking Jim down to 10 and going up to 19 himself. Jim's just going to draw a card and pass the turn back. And let's see if Nick can add some more threats to his board. And Inquisition is going to reveal an Inspiring Vantage. And we're likely to see another Shambling Vent attack here.
Wow. And this is definitely not what I would have expected to see. Wall of Omens holding down the fort while Shambling Vent is just attacking for 2. Into an opposing creature that can't block it.
Hey man, you got to get it done. Jim's going to draw a card and pass the turn back to Nick. Jim did pick up a copy of Lightning Bolt here though, so if Nick decides to continue to get aggressive with the Shambling Vent, it's going to bite the dust.
I don't think this is a particularly big loss for Nick. Essentially, he's trading one of his lands for one of Jim's spells. So Nick is going to draw something good soon, like a Lingering Souls or a Planeswalker, and he's going to be off to the races.
All right, Jim has finally decided to attack with that Monastery Swift Spirit just to check and see if Nick is going to block, which he does. Tap land and pass the turn back. Jim has a trio of Inspiring Vantage in his hand. There's a Lightning Helix. Man, Nick has just a bunch of removal that Jim is going to get to see. So Gitaxian Probe is going to reveal a hand. Oh, please put it in the middle of the table where the glare isn't.
It's all right. We don't need to see those cards anyway. So what's especially problematic about this matchup for Jim, at least how it seems to me, is he's basically playing a deck that's based on some creatures and some burn spells. And the burn spells are mainly there to clear blockers and maybe finish off your opponent. But if you're playing a deck that's, play some early creatures backed up by burn spells, you can be really vulnerable to a deck that just has a couple sources of life gain and then a bunch of removal, because your creatures never end up getting damage, and because you're not a full-on burn deck, you never have enough burn to burn out your opponent.
Well, Jim was able to see Bolt, Helix, double Path to Exile, but Nick picked up another copy of Lightning Bolt, which is going to be 9 points of burn. It's going to take Jim down to -1, and Nick Moore is going to burn his way through game 2 of this match. They're going to even this up at 1v1.
Pretty sweet to see Nick Moore be the one who burns his opponent out at the end of the game. But that's certainly what can happen when you're just ahead on cards. We saw this happen with the Jeskai control deck that Shahar Shenhar played in Worlds a while back, where he would just build up so many more resources than his opponent, and he would be able to convert those resources directly into damage because so many of his removal spells were burn spells. And we see Nick Moore kind of following a same formula.
Jim's deck is pretty interesting. It seems to be built off of the Jeskai aggro deck that Jeff Hoagland played in Milwaukee with like Mantis Rider, the old modern standby. But let's go ahead and take a quick second and talk about the upcoming pre-release while our players are sideboarding here, where you can get your very own Pandra Noir playmat. Aether Revolt pre-release January 14th and 15th. The StarCityGames.com Creature Collection Pandra Noir. Limited edition playmat available at participating stores. Let your local game store know that you want to have access to this playmat, and they can go online at go.starcitygames.com/pre-release to get set up with the StarCityGames.com pre-release kits. So looking here over the list, who do you think is going to have the edge in this game 3? Jim's going to be on the play, which is going to be a pretty big boon for the Goblin Side Monastery Swift player.
Yeah, it looks to me like it's going to be just a pretty bad matchup for Jim Davis, to be honest. He's just up against a lot of removal, and everything that he has dies to Lightning Bolt, and he's playing cards like Vapor Snag and Gitaxian Probe and Twisted Image that are going to be pretty lackluster in the matchup for the most part. He has 2 Geist of St. Traps on the sideboard, which I think can do some good work, but Nick Moore, he's got a little bit of life gain. He's got targeted discard. He has an absolute boatload of removal. He's got some Wall of Omens as essentially free blockers. He's got some Planeswalkers to pad his life total. It just kind of looks good for Nick Moore. He's got some good sources of card advantage as well. And his way to win the game, Lingering Souls, is really hard for Jim to interact with. Whereas Jim's way to win by just attacking with creatures is really easy for Nick to interact with. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle. It's definitely good for Jim that he's going to be on the play in this third game. Being on the play or the draw matters so much in these tempo-based matchups, but I think it's going to be a pretty clear example of an aggro deck against a control deck where the control deck just has access to all the tools that it really wants.
Well, we are heading into Game 3 here between Jim Davis on Jeskai Aggro, your current reigning Players Champion, against Nick Moore, who is on Mardu Control. So Jim's going to start off with Aspire Bluff Canal and attack with a Monastery Swift Spear, knocking Nick down to 19. Nick's going to start off with an Inquisition of Kozilek off of a Blackleaf Cliffs.
So I think if I was Nick, I would be eyeing that Snapcaster Mage in like your average green-black matchup, but the Storm Chaser Mage I think is going to be the better source of damage that also comes down earlier, and Jim doesn't really have any good options for targets for that Snapcaster Mage. Jim may end up using Gataxian Probe, play Snapcaster Mage, flashback Gataxian Probe, just so that he can play a 2-drop.
So the Inquisition is going to reveal a Probe, a Vapor Snag, a Snapcaster Mage, a Storm Chaser Mage, and an Arid Mesa for Jim Davis. And Inquisition will take that Storm Chaser Mage. He'll fire back with a Gataxian Probe. And Nick has what looks like 2 Arid Mesa, a Marsh Flats, Path to Exile, another Inquisition, and a Nahiri the Harbinger.
So a pretty decent hand for Nick. He was able to lead with a discard spell. He's going to follow it up with potentially another discard spell and a Path to Exile. So a nice draw from Nick, being able to sequence 2 spells on turn 2 potentially to help catch up from the fact that he's on the draw.
So Jim will fall to 18 from that Probe. I wonder if we're just going to see a Snapcaster Probe here to get an extra point of damage in on that Swift Spear and cycle through another card.
Yeah, I think Jim wants to see another draw. I think he also just wants to get another creature on the board. He knows that his Monastery Swift Spear is likely going to be tagged by a Path to Exile, and Jim does not want to be in a situation where he doesn't have an attacker on the board.
Right, so he will fall to 15 on the Fetch Shock for a Hallowed Fountain, then to 13 using Snapcaster Mage to cast Gataxian Probe again, and then his Monastery Swift Spear will attack in for 3 and knock Nick down to 16. Nick is going to fire off another Inquisition here, and we're going to see Scalding Tarn, Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Helix, and Vapor Snag. He's going to take the Lightning Helix. Pass the turn back. He does have that Arid Mesa untapped to be able to utilize that Path to Exile in his hand.
Yeah, and I think I would have used the Path to Exile on my main phase because you don't know if Jim has access to any counter magic. There's also that Vapor Snag that can get cashed in as essentially a counter spell, and being able to deny Jim that opportunity seems like a worthwhile endeavor.
Especially considering the creatures that Jim has on the battlefield. You know, if he has to Vapor Snag his Snapcaster Mage, that's great, and that pumps the Swift Spear. If he has to Vapor Snag the Swift Spear, you really don't lose all that much because it does have haste and only costs 1 mana.
Right.
Jim will fall to 11 and play Gataxian Probe. Nick will reveal a hand with 3 fetch lands, a Nahiri, and a Path to Exile.
And on the previous discard spell, the Inquisition, Nick chose to take the Lightning Helix, and I think he was looking at Jim's hand being stuck on 3 lands, and he basically didn't want Jim to just fire off the Helix because it'd be a lot of damage all at once. But I think there's also good consideration to just getting the Snapcaster Mage because it's a reusable source of damage, and it's a 2-for-1.
Jim will fall to 11 using his Scalding Tarn. He's going to go get a Snow-Covered Mountain.
Is he playing Scred?
You got to put the fear in him.
Who knows?
Jim is a big proponent of snow-covered lands whenever you can. One day he'll get hit by a Thermokarst and have to reevaluate that.
I'm going to put 1 on my sideboard next to my play just for Jim.
Sadly, it's not legal. I wish. All right, well, we are just going to Snapcaster Probe, falling to 8, and he picks up a Lightning Bolt. That's a good draw.
It's a great draw. So at this stage, things are starting to look a little more grim for Nick, but I wonder if Jim needs to worry about just getting burned out of this game at some point.
It's possible, since Nick does have both Lightning Bolt and Lightning Helix in his hand, although he doesn't have any of them currently in his grip.
Yeah, he has them in his deck, doesn't have them
in his
hand.
deck.
Yeah.
All right, Nick is going to fetch a basic Plains and Path to Exile the...
And now Jim's down to 7 from that Vapor Snag.
the Swift Spear.
One more fetch land, and Nick just needs a double bolt.
Yep, and Jim is going to Vapor Snag, creature back. Wall of Omens is going to be a big pickup here for Nick Moore. And a Shambling Vent.
So what's nice about this is going to dovetail into the Nahiri that's in Nick's hand quite well. He's had an okay life total. 13 life isn't too bad, but it's starting to get low, and especially after this attack phase, he's going to have to really worry about it.
Now, Jim did just pick up a copy of Spell Pierce, which is going to snag that Nahiri very well.
Yeah, great top deck.
Monastery Swift Spear will come down. Both Snapcaster Mages and the Swift Spear are going to enter the red zone for Jim Davis. Nick Moore is going to put his Wall of Omens in front of...
Looks like Jim's tapping the
yeah, he does have to tap his
wrong land,
his other
but
land
I'm
to
sure
cast
we'll get
Lightning Bolt.
taken care of momentarily.
There we go. So he will Lightning Bolt the Wall of Omens. That's going to kill it off when the Snapcaster Mage deals damage, and then 4 damage is going to come across to Nick Moore and bring him down to 9.
And this is looking really bad for Nick Moore.
Here we have a fetch land, and he picked up a copy of Lingering Souls that he can try and deploy here. Instead of that, Nahiri. Spell Pierce is going to take care of the Lingering Souls.
And I like countering that from Jim a lot. He just wants to shove a little bit more damage, and then he knows that a burn spell or 2 is going to finish Nick Moore off, even if he is able to start blocking Jim's creatures.
So it looks like he might have picked up a copy of Mutagenic Growth here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He could put Nick down to 1, but he'll drop down to 5 himself.
Yeah, this is a real, I want to say it's a real slugfest, but Nick Moore hasn't actually thrown any punches yet. Jim's just been basically punching his opponent and himself in the face over and over again. So
maybe he's just been punching his opponent with his face.
Yeah, there you go.
Sometimes the best defense is a good offense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, into the red zone we go. Let's see if he decides to Mutagenic Growth. He is. He'll pay 2, fall down to 5.
And I like using the Mutagenic Growth now because he knows that those Lingering Souls are coming down potentially on the following turn, and that his options to use something like Mutagenic Growth may not be as easy to do once there's Lingering Souls in play and it's some open mana. So cashing that in while the coast is clear seems like a good idea to me.
So Nick Moore is just going to flash back Lingering Souls and play another fetch land that he can't use. All Jim Davis has to do here is attack with all of his creatures. And Nick Moore is going to die from the 1 point of combat damage. And Jim Davis is going to take this match with his Jeskai aggro deck going to 9-1, beating down against Mardu. It feels like Nick's